Hello, hello, shall we start? Do take a seat. As speakers, you can come at the front here. There's 3 seats for you. Welcome, welcome, and thank you for making it on a Friday afternoon, the last day of the London Climate Action Week. We thought it was very suited to give you a bit of food for the brain with that very important yet philosophical question. So this is the first of what we call a cross-current session that we are curating with the Conduit. A few words in introduction about myself. My name is Sophie Lambin. I'm the founder and CEO of Kite Insights. At Kite, we work with companies to help them take thoughtful action on the issues that matter. We do this in different ways. On one hand, we work on developing research and insights to help organizations make sense of those issues that are inherently knotty and complex. And while companies aim to do good, doing good well is not a given. Often that has unintended consequences, and we help companies think about that. We also help companies take a stance on issues that matter, because movements need leaders, and we believe that having a clear stance is a critical underpinning to taking action, but also to inspire others to act. And finally, through learning journeys, engaging what we call the head, the heart, and the hands, which underpin our climate school, we help leaders, employees build capabilities to take action in their roles, companies, and industry sectors. Now, so much of the work we do at Kite is in collaboration with organizations like the Conduit that are deeply committed to tackling issues that matters, but that bring a different set of skills, audience, and communities. So we've been very fortunate to work with the Conduit for quite a few years. Not long ago, we were living upstairs, quite nostalgic of those time. We've also been supported quite early on by the Conduit Connect when we did our capital raise a few months ago. And lastly, we actually launched the Climate School in this very space this time last year, which was more of a party, and that was also at the Conduit. So we are thrilled, along with Paul Van Zyl, who unfortunately couldn't come, and Rosie, that is standing at the back there, to announce a formal partnership with the Conduit and Kite Insights, which after many years of informal collaboration is now official. We clearly feel that we have a strong alignment in terms of our mission, our shared conviction in the power of engaged community, which the Conduit does so well through its very informative and thought-provoking programs. So we're delighted to launch Cross Currents. This is the first of many, we hope. And we thought that today, to celebrate that opening, we'll start with that deep philosophical discussion, food for the mind and for the soul, we hope, which is, the question is being human our biggest impediment to climate action? It's clearly not a yes or no answer to that question, but quite a well, maybe it is a yes or no for some of you. It's certainly a very profound one. If it's yes, it has to be yes but or no but. And it's true that on one hand, when you think about it, it is our human ingenuity that has led to some of the most exciting innovation in history, which led to increased prosperity for all, most, but also it's the same innovations that have actually contributed to our current demise. Many of us, particularly in the North, are stuck in a mindset that has deeply distanced us from nature, from natural system, from each other. And we have so far failed to recognize the scale of the crisis and to act anticipatively, despite plentiful of scientific evidence of the accelerated destruction of our planet. So today's question is our human mindsets, short-termism, behaviors resistant to change, and desires for material wealth are what's blocking us from climate action. And if so, what is needed to shift at the space, scale, and scale needed? Now, psychologically, the climate crisis is very complicated for the human mind, as it demands us as humans to confront ourselves, to ask ourselves who we are, how we live, but also to come to terms with the level of destruction we have caused and to recognize the extent of our transgression, in particularly in the North. Now, the question is, could technology support humans in tackling climate change faster and better? Are underrepresented frame of mind, such as indigenous mindsets and practices, the key to unlocking lasting climate progress at scale, etc., etc. So, having set the scene, I would like to welcome to the stage, wait a minute, our panelists who will help us to hopefully enrich our understanding of this challenging question. So please join me in welcoming my panelists to the stage, starting with Judy Ling Wang. Judy is honorary president of the Black Environment Network. She's also a painter, a poet, an environmentalist. And Judy is best known for her work in creating the field of multicultural environmental participations in the built and natural environment. Next, please join me in welcoming Himanshu Gupta. Himanshu is the co-founder and CEO of Climate AI, a company which is harnessing AI to help business model the climate risk and opportunities for adaptation. With 15 years of experience, which is hard to believe, looking at you, he was the lead modeler for the Emission Pathway Project for India for the Paris Agreement. And last but no means least, please join me in welcoming Leo Johnson. Leo is the disruption lead at PwC. Might sound like a contradiction in terms, but no, it is not. He's also the co-presenter of the BBC Radio 4 Future Proofing. He has really been a precursor of mobilizing private sector leaders in taking action of climate for many decades, and is currently leading a fascinating research project with Oxford University on the paradox of intent. Wonderful. So, I'm going to divide this conversation in 3 rounds. First round is really going with the premise that our human mind is the biggest impediment. What is your view on that? Second one is going to be, what can we do about it? And third one is, what practice do you yourself develop personally? So maybe I'll start with, who shall I start with? Maybe I'll start with you, Leo. Yes. Last in, first out, talking. So can you tell us a little bit, frame the problem for us? What about in humanities today do you believe is blocking climate action? And it's on.
Okay, so the issue is going to be what do we mean by human? And let me immediately get really boring. I think we've had a definition of human that was given to us and that it's been pretty hard to kind of work around, which is, call it Homo economicus, where we are this being who operates under neoliberal...
Hold on, sorry. I said it wasn't working, but it's clear.
Did you miss? If you missed all of that, you are fortunate. No, did you get? Okay, fine, all right. Look, I think we got given a neoliberal economics recipe that's pretty entrenched, which is, what does happiness come from? What does utility come from? Well, it comes from consumption. And the whole game in town is maximizing utility through consumption. And, in this Homo economicus model, it's not just that we're cut off from each other, we're cut off from the bits of ourselves that have actually got other interests other than utility derived through consumption. Well, we know that the marginal return of that goes to kind of 0 or negative pretty early, but we're locked into that system. And the problem with this Homo economicus is it clings really tightly to the one thing it does get, which is this utility from having stuff, from being able to get access to some pleasure through things. And the one thing that climate change does is it threatens to disrupt the scarce remaining pleasures that we've got it threatens to disrupt them. And what we're being asked to do is tear away this one thing that's left to us. And we then respond very logically to that, which is saying, screw that. That's the last thing I'm going to do. Or maybe we will resist such an obvious line of refusal because we want to think of ourselves as pretty decent people. And the project that Sophie referred to is a project we're starting with the Smith School at Oxford, which is trying to look at this paradox, which is just as all the data is telling us we have really got ourselves into a huge mess with colliding and accelerating megatrends, which are really like a car that's going over a cliff. We appear to be seeing not just escalating crises, but escalating denial of the crises and escalating polarization of it. And what we're looking at is the mechanics of that denial. That it turns out, from the sort of earliest field tests we've been doing, that within each of us, even like the most hardest, corest, environmentally-ist of us, there will be these voices that will be coming up with these adaptive mechanisms to soothe the overheating amygdala that we've all got as we confront this crisis. And these small little voices, you can call them, or sub-personae, within our psyches that say to us, varying ones, that, actually maybe the science isn't that certain. Or maybe probably the most seductive for this room, maybe there will be a techno-solutionist, a quick fix, or a long fix, or some direct air capture that will suck out some gigatons of carbon from the air. Or maybe we're okay because there are great people like Greta Thunberg out there who are doing it for us. Or maybe we're okay because we've got a really funky startup that's doing something really cool and we recycle, so we're actually on the good side. We've got a series of kind of jujitsu moves that we use to say to ourselves, okay, relax, relax. And what those moves do is they sabotage our insight or our intent or our execution of a collective response to this problem and leave us, in a sense, because of our humanity, because of our frailty, and because of a particular reduction of what it is to be human, that we've all, in a way, been obliged to buy into, because it's very hard not to buy into it. I think we're left in this model of a car that's kind of going over a cliff, and it's just damn hard. It's just damn hard to do something to change the direction.
Thank you, Lou. It's a great setup, and certainly an invitation to get much deeper in understanding those mechanisms that we're not clearly fully aware of in our response to climate change. But we'll come back to that. So, Himanshu, you work in the world of technology. Obviously, it's framed in sort of good or bad, human, not human. What is your view on the role that technology plays in societal transformation over time, and the role that you believe it can play in climate action?
Absolutely. And if I may just add to the concept of Homo economicus, today what we are is Homo tectocus. That's a term I just made. Right?
Can you define?
But, I grew up in a very small town, India, in one of the most religious towns, Hindu holy towns of India, right? And so growing up, growing up where I used to go to schools.
You need to keep it close to your mouth.
Okay. So growing up, I was very much influenced by what our grandparents used to teach me. And the core of those teachings of like how you live was based on this principle of what we are as a human, right? And what we are as a human, as per Hinduism, is you are part of this big wheel of nature, where imagine yourself as a cog of that wheel of nature. The outer rim of that wheel is nature, and the other cogs are nothing but us, how we interact with animals, with each other, and so on and so forth. So that was the first principle. Like we are, and if any cog is disturbed, the wheel of nature is disturbed. The second part that was taught to us was this our relationship like with nature, like how do you build this relationship? And just like any other personal relationship that we build, it's a relationship of give and take. If you're taking something from nature, you also give it back, right? And that's where the problem of technology lies. So what technology has done is it has somehow disconnected us from these two core principles, where A, we have, frankly, we don't understand what is our relationship with nature. B is we have forgotten what is the value of our nature. Because we have forgotten what is the value of nature to our daily lives, we just don't understand how to give it back. So we keep on, and that's where, like, all the way from industrialization, we talk about the invention of coal and machinery that allowed us to extract more from the nature before giving it back in the equal amounts. Oh, this is the third. Talking about technology doesn't like me right now, for obvious reasons. And so just to give you an example is I call it like the current supply chain of fashion retail, as well as my grandma's supply chain. So how many, if I show of hands, how many of you actually buy from this new platform, Shein? Or like how many of you actually bought from this Amazon live video-based e-commerce, where there's an influencer showing you clothes, and then you just press a button, pop, and then you can buy your clothes right away. And it's delivered to you like within a day or 2 days. All right, so.
Very enlightened audience, clearly.
No, I don't do that. Well, anyway, so the point being, so think about all the trousers you're wearing, like, so even my trouser, right? The overall water footprint of this trouser is close to 4,000 liters. You can always like make assumptions about is it like plus minus 20%, 30%, right? Doesn't seem that way, right? Now, if you were to humanize this problem of 4,000 liters, why should you care? And you should care because last year, there's an entire city of Mexico called Monterrey came to day zero. What day zero means is, even if you are rich or poor, doesn't matter. Even if you have money, you couldn't just afford to buy a bottle of drinking water there. That's how insane the crisis was, right? So imagine if a typical person in that city of Mexico is consuming 3 or 4 liters of drinking water. So this single trouser is now responsible for basically 1,000 Mexicans going waterless for a day. Right? So it's that part of like connection with each other as humans that we have forgotten. Right? Back to your point of like, okay, we are short-sighted. We value short-termism over long-termism. We are getting a lot more individualistic. Right? It's about me. Unless I can feel how it impacts me, I don't care. Right? So that's where technology has played like, I would say like not responsible role. It has been, look, don't get me wrong, it has been very fruitful for us to move the humanity forward. Think about the invention of vaccines and so on. So at the same time, we have over-leveraged technology to do, in some cases, irreversible damage to nature.
The second round, I'm going to ask you how you plan to deploy it to support climate action. So Judy, if I come to you, where do you think we fall short as humans when it comes to enabling ourselves to take action on climate?
Basically, I think the fundamental issue is that we're not human enough all the time. Now, you've had moments in which you were pushed to be deeply human. That was COVID. When your own parents, your own grandparents were threatened with death, you became deeply human. And the numbers of you feeling deeply human also showed you that being deeply human has power upon politics. Now, most of the time, politics and policy, when they're asked to do something for people, they first run to their accountant. If the accountant says, actually, it doesn't add up, nothing will happen. But that moment of COVID showed you what can happen in terms of the release of resources. We're in bad national debt because of it. Everybody has to pay. But yet it happened because of deep humanity. Now, we're not enacting that deep humanity in terms of climate change. Firstly, because we have not enough imagination. This is where creativity and imagination and identification plays a huge role in our survival in climate change. You really cannot imagine that you're going to die. You cannot imagine that we will have nothing to eat because of the way the crops fail. You cannot imagine water wars. You cannot imagine food wars. You cannot imagine that if you had a loaf of bread going down the street, someone might kill you for it for their child. Yeah? But this can happen because climate change is the most devastating thing historically we have ever faced. And we are not facing it. We're not realizing it. We forget it very easily. Next day we go to school or go to work and it's gone again. But this is what it is about. You're realizing in your head and in your heart that you might not survive as humanity. And of course, this is going to happen first in the rest of the world, where the weather is more extreme. They are doing this now. They're dying this now. And we're not connected. And you're not shocked enough to say, I am so deeply human and I feel so deeply about these other people. My government, do something now. Nobody is doing it. This is the problem. We're not, through our so-called scientific society, our neatness, all our processes, our comfortable lives, that we just do not face the fact that we have to deal with this death staring at us in the face.
So how do we bring that humanity back in face of that crisis? And I know you have practiced the art of community participation to unleash that humanity. Can you talk a little bit about your practice, Judy?
Well, I do something called multicultural environmental participation, starting in 1987 with the Black Environment Network, which is about enabling ethnic minorities to begin to join the mainstream environmental movement. So what I've learned from that is how you can bring people together in order to begin to identify as a world. This is really important in the environmental sector because if you look at the people we call ethnic minorities, they are a minority here, but they are actually the ethnic global majorities. White people are only 11% of the world population. And if we were serious about climate change, having minorities here is a huge advantage. If we begin to be interested in building proper, genuine, human, trustworthy relationships with them. Why? By doing that, suddenly you gain the skills, the ease of relationship with the ethnic majorities of the world. And despite being minorities, Britain and members of the West are still the most powerful negotiators. You need those skills. You need that identification with the world, which comes through that intercultural exchange that is here in this country. You don't need to run anywhere to do this. We are all here, and we are continuous with the world. So if you're serious about that, you begin to find the building up of that identification with the world in a way that you also use your skills to negotiate and so on. And on the world stage, start doing what we need, which is worldwide collaboration to solve the problem. No matter how perfect we are here in the UK, we will not change climate change.
Himanshu, I mean, this point about communities is increasingly talked about. It creates a smaller group of people that can make those critical human connections that together can start enacting change. Surely technology has a role to play in enabling that.
Yeah. Clearly, I mean, first of all, like we should, going back to your point about being human, right?
Bring the mic closer.
Yeah. If you talk about being human, you should also be mindful of how much access we are giving to the technology in driving what's called being human, right? But at the same time, I think technology has also a potential to help us understand and connect back with nature. and value nature as well. So as an example, I'll give you an example. So we work with the largest cranberry company in the US called Ocean Spray.
Cool what?
Ocean Spray. So if there are some Americans in here, they'll realize it's a quintessential American brand. Now, what they saw is their yields in Wisconsin and Massachusetts reducing. And it's not like they, of course they knew that there are increased heat waves in Massachusetts, and they were acting accordingly, and they had the best practices in agriculture and whatnot. It's just like they just couldn't figure out what the problem is, right? Then we ran data science models on like, okay, let's understand what's driving this reduction in yields. And what we discovered was surprising. So in that data science model, we also factored in the activity of bees in that area. And boom, there was a clear correlation. So what we discovered is that the increased heat waves are causing a reduction in the bee activity in that area. And bee are the nature's pollinators. And then they realized, oh my God, this is what the problem is, right? And suddenly you see, like in whole of US, many food companies talking about, hey, can we deploy beekeeping as a service? Now this is coming up as a new sector, beekeeping as a service. I mean, that's taking it to an extreme, but if we were to realize the importance of bees and the services that they provide to us, we probably wouldn't have gone to that extreme in the first place, right? So that's just one example as to how technology can help us connect back with nature and value nature.
And Leo, if I go to you then for that second round, what was the opportunity to unleash humanity to act on climate? In other words, are we doomed?
No. Okay, I think technology is not the answer. It's the amplifier of intent. And the question for me is, how do we unlock the intent? And right now, in climate discourse and across a whole series of the conflicts we've got, the challenges we've got, there's a model which is, the academics call it the knowledge deficit model. Basic idea is people are doing this dumb stuff because they've got some data gaps. And what we need to do is hit them on the head with more data about the problem until finally, here it is, ocean warming, tipping points, Johan Rockström, finally they'll hit this effective tipping point where bing, the lights go on and oh, they get it and they change it, and it's bullshit. The opposite happens. All that happens is the fear swells. And we're not indifferent despite the fact we're going over the cliff. It's worse than that. We're indifferent because we're going over the cliff. It is the crisis that motivates inaction. So we need to find another way through. And what I want to propose is, so that's the first paradox of intent, is a second paradox, which is, the point about this intent is you can't force it. You can't get someone else to feel intent. You can't get yourself to feel intent. How does it arrive? And I'm going to sound like, I don't know, Yoko Ono or someone at this point. But I am more and more thinking that there is this second paradox of intent, which is, if we do want to try collectively to do this very big thing of changing the course of how we are responding to an existential crisis, and that's the outcome we're after, we actually have to put ourselves into an emotional space with each other where we actually, for a moment, put aside that outcome and do this thing which we don't really do very much because we don't have much time to do it, which is actually to look at each other and to listen to each other. And there's a wonderful Lithuanian, French, Jewish philosopher called Emmanuel Levinas, who talks about the face. And he talks about the non-negatability of the face. And one of the things that COVID did was it negated all of our faces. It hid us from each other. And for me, the practice that manufactures intent is this crazy thing of actually listening to each other. And for a moment, brief moment, escaping, liberating ourselves from our solipsism, our narcissism, our egotism, and actually just being there in the presence of someone else and listening to them very deeply. And when that happens, I think there is a two-way alchemical shift. First thing is, first, how often does someone actually listen to you? in your working day, in your working month, in your life, possibly, really properly put their arm around you and listen to you? Not that often. So it's an extraordinary, acknowledging thing to do to someone that helps them acknowledge what's inside them, including the crazy bits, the intuitions, just the very bits that, including fresh thinking that we need and fresh values to get us out of this space. So to do that unlocks them, but also, just as important, I think, is something happens to you when you have that exchange, which is your radius of intent shifts, and you find it encompassing that other person, and you grow, you grow.
Judy, I was going to ask you to react to that.
Yes, I think we need to realize that we need to work on relationship. The two main relationships that underpin solutions to sustainability is the relationship of people to nature and the relationship of people to each other. If we cared about or loved nature enough, we would never have done what we did. And we love people enough, we would never damage them. In a sense, you can see the neglect and the non-reading of the impact of climate change devastating nature and people is in fact a spiritual and moral failure. Now, what Leo is talking about is, can we hone back in on ourselves and talk about your relationship to nature? In this country, there are already many people who say they suffer from eco-anxiety and eco-grief. They're grieving now for the animals going extinct already, and the ones that have already gone extinct. They're grieving now for the people who have died and are dying right now. Yeah. And yet, most of the time in this country, there are not enough of them. Do you carry this grief? What is your relationship to nature or to people? What is your emotion about it that would drive you to do something? Just like during COVID, if there's enough of you being driven, the government will realize, I cannot not act. They are actually pushed to do things they don't even want to do.
But Judy, if I build on that, to be able to have that relationship to each other, to nature, that loving relationship, there is prerequisite that we love ourselves as well. And I think there is so much shame, in a way, and this sense of transgression that, what we have caused to nature, to each other, that we also need to acknowledge. I'm just wondering, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, historically, human beings, have been magnificent and horrific in history. We come up with the most ingenious ideas and solutions, and science is part of that. Science is very important. But at the same time, we've come up with the most idiotic pseudoscience like racism. And part of that relational thing to the world is actually the legacy of racism and colonialism entrenched in the economics. And economics is held up so high on the agenda now that we're hardly shifting that history. And it's a big barrier to collaboration because it keeps damaging huge parts of the world in a way that you cannot collaborate. It's a barrier to collaboration. So when you feel very strongly there is, at this moment in the 21st century, because of climate change being such a historical threat like never before, we have to face up to the fact that the amount of transformation is massive. We can't say, oh, we do a little bit here, a little bit there. We have to change the whole economic system, the relational system. And at the end, if we do that, my God, human beings are marvelous. We know so much, we can do so much. We have enough food in the world, we can feed everybody. We can have a fabulous life. And yet we choose this disaster.
Himanshu, you want to comment?
I'll just add that only if we had an option of resetting humanity to zero, right, and start from scratch, then for sure we'll apply all of those principles. But we don't have that option. We want to love each other, but there are these individualistic conflicts that prevent us. Like could be racism, could be our jobs, which are at stake if we decide to go back to our relationship with nature. And I think it's the first thing, I mean, coming from the US, where I was so surprised to see that climate change, the acceptability of climate change is an issue, right? And this week, I was listening to Sir Stammer, right? The leader of the opposition party here. Either if you listen to the prime minister or the leader of opposition party, both of them agree that, okay, climate change is a big issue. That alone to me was like a big thing. Now, having said that, one mistake that we did in the US, and that's my view, observing US as an outsider for the last 10 years, is we did not listen to each other. We suddenly figured out that climate change is an issue. We had some solutions, and we just went on and on about not listening to all those coal communities in the west of in Virginia who have been doing coal mining for ages. That's what they had done their entire lives, and that we just pushed them to the wall. And as a result, it's not just the progress in the US, the progress in the entire world has stalled. And that's the thing, we need to be a bit more empathetic before thinking about these transformational solutions to organizing our relationship with nature again.
Great. So before we go into actually enabling some human relationship and connection, in case you didn't know, I'm going to ask each of you a very quick answer to the following question to inspire the conversation that will follow. What practice do you use as individuals to enhance your connection to each other or to nature that you'd be willing to share with us tonight? Leo.
Okay, I trained at the Samaritans, which is in radical listening. I don't know, has anyone in the room ever done that? It's unbelievably hard and challenging and moving. Samaritans, the suicide hotline, it's like this, just like people's lives, and the rest of the world disappears. It's quite extraordinary. But the other thing I do, which strangely is almost, I don't know, but there's some link, is I, like having struggled with technology for some time, like the technology I now use is a chisel. And I try to make stone heads, big stone heads. And it's just incredibly humbling because you have to submit to the stone and you have to listen to it. And as you hit it, you can tell if there's a crack by the sound. And there'll be smells of sort of decaying vegetation from 20,000 years ago coming out. So it's really tactile. It's really the hands, the body, really aligned with a spirit that is saying, I am not the boss. I am not the boss. And you're just trying to understand how to work with this material. And then I'm trying to make these faces as well that for me represent something of a time when we were something other than Homo economicus, when we were made of this godlike stardust, and we've still got a bit of that energy. So I do that for hours and hours.
And that unleash,
strengthen
your intent.
Yeah.
Great, thank you.
Still very, very bad, but really passionate about it.
Doesn't matter. Imanshu.
I'll just add three things, three small
very quick, yeah.
points. Yeah. One is, I remember the 3 mantras, which was taught to us in this Hindu book of wisdom. And coincidentally, one of our professors at Stanford Business School, Joel Peterson, he used to be the CEO of JetBlue Airlines. He also taught the same 3 mantras. One was, it's not about me when it comes to like either leadership or it's about building that relationship with each other, right? A, it's not about me. B, I have everything I need. And C, I'm not my emotions. And I keep reminding myself whether I'm running a company or I'm servicing, like I'm providing service to or voluntary service to a community or not or whatnot. And that has helped me quite a bit in being a more empathetic listener and thinking about our relationship with nature. Like, hey, why do I need to buy like 10 to 12 clothes in a year? Or, can I have just 1 or 2 suits? Because I have everything I need.
Wonderful. Thank you, Judy.
I allow my grief for all the suffering of the beautiful animals, the plants, and the human beings to be constantly present. And I allow my love for them to be constantly present. And that feeds all that I do.
Well, thank you. Thank you to have shared a bit of your humanity at the service of climate action. This is not end with that group, wonderful group of speakers. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Ella, who is going to take you through the next phase of our talk. Maybe a round of applause for our speakers.
So now it's your turn to share some humanity with each other. So what we're going to do is ask a quick question to the room. We're not going to make you stand up because we're going to get jumbled, but I'm going to ask you a question, which is, let me just check I get the question right. Are modern mindsets our biggest impediment to climate action? So the question, we're going to scale of 0 to 10. So if you think 0, that means you really don't think that modern mindsets are getting in the way of progress. If you think 10, you really strongly believe that those modern mindsets are stalling our action on climate. So if you're at 0, we're going to raise your hand as I go up the numbers, and I just want to see where the room is at on that question. So 0. 1. Don't be embarrassed. 2. 3. 4. 5. Lots of middle ground, okay. 6. 7. 8. 9. 10. Were you raising your hands? You were 9. What were you, Himanshu?
I was also 9.
You were 9. Judy? 10? So what we're going to ask you to do is you're going to spend 15 minutes, I know it says 20, but we'll change the timer, to talk amongst yourselves. So if the people around you raise their hand at the same time as you, so around the same numbers, I'm going to ask you to see if you can go and sit with someone who didn't raise their hand at the same time as you. So if you're sitting next to someone you know, or who raised their hand at the same time, maybe turn behind you, or in front of you, or to the side. And we're going to sit in groups of 3, 4, 5, it doesn't really matter, and have a bit of a conversation around these 2 questions. Firstly, at an individual level, what mindsets do you think you need to let go of in order to be an effective change maker? And what mindsets do you need to embrace? And if you get through that question already between you and 15 minutes, you can turn to the question of how can we, as communities, begin to create the behavior shifts that we need. So start as an individual and then move to the broader community conversation if you have time. We'll change the timer, so it's 15 minutes. Is that clear? Does everyone know what they need to do? We'll be walking around if you have any questions.
And our speakers will also be walking around. It's amazing how time flies when you have fun. Thank you for indulging into that little exercise. So, I'm just going to ask a few people to share back. What mindset do you need to let go of? What mindset might you need to embrace to unleash your humanity? Zoe, Chloe, sorry. Why don't I go to you first?
Thank you, Sophie. Hi, I'm Chloe from The Conduit, for those of you that haven't met me before. My answer to this question is letting go of the need to have all of the answers at the beginning of a problem and embracing the unknowable experience of being human.
Wonderful. Thank you. Anyone else? What might you want to let go of? I'm going to have to nominate people. Anyone? Thank you. No, the mic is coming.
I do project very well.
Yes.
Hello, thank you. And I'm also an economist, so apologies, Judy.
What's your name?
So I work in consulting, and at the moment I, get the opportunity to be talking to, senior exec and chairs. But I find that being quite young and new to the business world, I don't feel I necessarily want to speak up, and I think that I need to let go of my insecurities that what I have to say is not worthwhile, and just, obviously you need to take time and approach it well, but letting go of that insecurity that that I don't have something worthwhile and that it's not, I get this kind of feeling that, what does my opinion mean to these senior decision makers? So letting go of that. And the other one was actually just like accepting imperfections in life and being grateful for what you have and not necessarily, I think there's this kind of mindset of constantly wanting to progress and have money, and maybe it's okay to just accept where I am in life and not necessarily chase that ladder.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for letting go of that fear right now and sharing what you've just did. Thank you.
I think I'd add to that I think I hear it repeated in the news. A lot of people think their individual actions don't matter, but collectively they will, and they do, and they have to. I think that's one of the biggest obstacles, is getting people to understand that their actions do matter.
Wonderful. Thank you. Maybe a few more. Daniel?
Hi, thank you. I'm Daniel. We spoke about how even people, like many of us who work in this field, it's very difficult to know what decisions to make, to know if what we're buying is actually sustainable, if it's actually ethical. With all the frameworks out there, all the different government regulations, all the different platforms, you kind of end up with analysis paralysis, and then you don't end up doing anything, or it just becomes overwhelming. So maybe one mindset we need to let go of is trying to find that perfect product and just doing something in the right direction, and incrementally getting there that way, rather than ending up doing nothing because you can't find that perfect solution.
Great. Very relatable. Anyone else?
Oh, sorry. Rose doing really well.
I know. Hi, I'm Gaia from A-Word. We were having a conversation about what mindset we had to drop, and it's probably that idea that somebody else is going to solve the problem on our behalf, or that companies or government, we're always looking at the silver bullet. Somebody else is going to find a way for us to do something. And I'm inherently optimistic, so I do understand that I speak from the other side of the spectrum, but I truly, honestly believe, and here we were having this conversation, that by being privileged, and this is something that we need to all acknowledge, otherwise we wouldn't probably be here, we have to do 3 times more than what others might be required to do, because we do have to, we often talk about walk the talk, but it is also about speaking up and about bringing more people along on this journey with us, and not making them feel bad because they have decided to go to a fast food or whatever bad thing maybe we want to consider right now. Anyway, regardless, I hate the fact that we are considered consumers, but that is what we are, and great point on economics, but it's the reality of our economic system. So we should all play our part and acknowledge our responsibilities.
Lastly, there, thank you.
Hi, I'm Sarah Scott from Tanzania. I often ask people, like, what is it going to take to change? And and I see it in the global north getting uncomfortable. We're quite uncomfortable in the global south with climate change. And so I think that just, my grandfather asked me when I was younger to, for 1 year, only buy what I wanted and not what I needed. And that shifted me fundamentally to ask the next question is, what is enough? And that should be a real driving force of our conversation, is what is enough for that investor and the return on the investment that he gets for the carbon project that he's invested in Tanzania or wherever. What is enough so that there is fair share, because we live in a world of abundance and not scarcity.
Wonderful, thank you. Thank you for indulging into that discussion. So our speakers have taken plentiful of notes, except Leo. He was doing some intense listening, I think. Yeah, so any reflections that you'd like to share from what you heard in the conversation you were in as a few final thoughts? Imanshu.
Yeah, I like the point around individual actions do matter, right? And then we have to recognize our privilege as well, right, before telling others what to do. Having said that, I'm more of a practicalist, right? I don't believe in like idle things. If the word was idle, things would have been great. But word is not idle, right?
Idle, did you say?
Yeah, ideal. Yeah. So as an example, if you think about just in your own actions, like think about can you replace the single-use plastics, or like even the grocery bags you carry, the paper bags, with like a reusable grocery bag that you can use all the time. We used to do that when we were kids. And if you can do that, you can see like the impact it would have as collectives on the ocean biodiversity, as well as on people as well. And remember, nature has a way of like, getting you to pay back. And in this case, we didn't exactly, like someone said, like we don't need to have all the answers, right? And that's the scary part as well as the good part. The scary part is because we didn't have the answers of like what impacts plastics could have on us. Now it's showing up where more and more oceans, we are discovering more and more microplastics in oceans and the salmon that we eat, and that is leading to more and more cancers globally, right? So we might not have all the answers, but that is not an excuse to not act.
Judy?
I went around listening to people, and there was quite a lot of guilt, a lot of analysis of failure of getting information, of not knowing what to do even when there's motivation and so on. And one of the things I've found in my community work is that the most important thing when you want people to do something is to acknowledge that the smallest gesture is to be congratulated. You have to be very kind to yourself and say, I did that, not very big, but I did that. It's when you do that kindness to yourself, that you will continue. You will repeat that small gesture, you'll be motivated to find out a bit more, you do that and congratulate yourself, and you are on the journey. I think that is what is most important.
Thank you. Leo?
Thank you. So I got very deeply caught up in one conversation with Mary and Jenny.
As one does.
And it began with Mary saying, yeah, what you said is basically bollocks. saying like, this listening stuff's completely fatuous, that's never going to do anything. Imagine you walk into a room full of Trump supporters, you're not going to get anywhere. Okay, so what I want to, can I have your permission to like do it? I need someone really like Butch who's been to the gym, seriously worked out, is really tough. I see like I think I see a really in check shirt, really good-looking guy at the back, Mr. Jean de Fougerolles, even possibly. Jean, can you come on down to the front, please? Yes, ascension together. Yes, yes. Okay,
An applause for Jean.
Okay, so I need to project it. Okay, so Jean. Yes. I'm going to ask you. I want you to.
Is this like Elon Musk against?
Okay. So. My shoulder. I want you with your hold. Let's stay this. With your arm out like that, okay, like that.
Someone is
flat. Okay. I want you to hold on.
Oh, jiu-jitsu.
I want you to with straight arm. With a straight arm. I want you to lunge towards me and take that arm and touch it. Okay. You must be very impressed by that. All right. What was my point there? That what happened was three things. Okay. One. I saw where he was coming from. Okay, he was coming from there. His energy was going from my right to my left. He was coming from over there. Two, I made contact. Three, I then blended in a slightly clumsy way that didn't look that good. Okay, I blended my energy with his. Neither of us fell over. There wasn't a fight. I disabled him. I didn't get it. It all worked out fine. Trump, in other words, what do you do with the Trumpers or name some other British catastrophes that we've had? Fantastic.
Thank you, Jean.
What's my point is, you can't take anyone down. You can't. We don't know the solutions. We know we don't know the solutions. And if we do, with heroic acts of intention, come up with what we think is the solution, it's going to create knock-on effects, unintended consequences, massive, mega top-down screw-ups. We know that stuff. The only way, I think, is a little bit of humility, a little bit of radical listening, a little bit of trying to manage radical difference on the basis of that listening and trying to come up with some collective solutions that do try to understand, what's not the thing they're showing that they really care about, what's the underlying thing? What's the underlying thing that they're really caring about? Because it's in that underlying thing that there's maybe going to be the space for the connection and the type of solution that might not just work theoretically, but which both sides may actually do. That's my attempt. That's my final attempt to try to persuade you, Mary and Jenny.
She's nodding.
Thank you, Jean.
All right.
But you know, there are also lots of easy things to do. You know? Like one tap of the finger, electronic participation in campaigns. People are doing all the hard work, they're heading in the right direction. Please push that one button and help, because that is really important. Don't underestimate these easy things. The other thing is there are great organizations that you can trust. Find the ones that you can trust, like Greenpeace and so on. Checkbook participation. Yeah, it is very important. They need to survive. They need the money to do the campaigns. So there are easy ways that are also effective, and you allow the experts to do it on your behalf. Of course, the things that only you can do, like choosing what you eat and so on, those are the things that need to be addressed. But otherwise, there are lots of things you can do that can help the movement.
Thank you. So a final round of questions. Judy, how many years would you say you've been an environmentalist? For how many years have you been?
40 years.
40, Himanshu?
Almost like 15 years now.
15 years, Leo?
You sound so old. I did my master's at UCL in environmental economics in 92.
92. 32
It's
years.
old.
Yeah. So what do you, knowing what you know now about how to enable change, what you wish you knew at the time, knowing what you know now about how to drive change, what would you have liked to know when you started your work 40 years ago, 15 years ago, 32 years ago? Final question. Anyone who wants to go first? Yeah. Judy, okay. He needs more thinking time.
Well, I think that during that time, I worked on lots of processes that are very fundamental and very deep. And one of them is change is the coming together of thinking, feeling, and action. So, very simple, but very challenging, yeah? If you think and not feel, you might not act. If you feel and not think, you might do all the wrong things, even if you're acting. And the final thing is the effort to take the action. Then change will come.
Head, heart, hands. Thank you. Himanshu.
I'll just say that I wish growing up as an engineer, as a science student, I was dismissive of how the importance of religion, right? And spirituality and nature. I wish I wasn't. And it's cool to say that, hey, you know what, let's think about this problem and the solution from first principles standpoint. But we are wrong. First principles always comes from nature. And to your work, right? I mean, and how do we, I wish I had known that, and I would have been a better student of science.
Wonderful, thank you. Leo?
I was hoping I was going to come up with some blinding insight, but it just ain't happened at all. I still don't really feel I know at all. All I know is, all I've learned is my capacity for self-delusion is almost infinite. And I will drink so much Kool-Aid, and I will believe that God knows what, from environmental economics to climate tech, I will believe anything is the solution because I'm so desperate for a solution. So I would find people who will tell you, who will call you out on your own bullshit. Is and please come, more people call me out on my own bullshit. I welcome it. But I believe in, finally, the only economist who I've really, really fallen in love with ever is E.F. Schumacher, who writes about the massive, the small. The small is beautiful. I believe in the massive small, and that what resonates and is really true will replicate, and we just gotta trust that.
And yet you're doing all so much with what you know. So please join me in thanking us wonderful speakers. Thank you. Thank you to you to come on a Friday evening for this session. More to come for the Conduit and Kite Insights on the Countercurrent series. And yes, I wish you a restorative, connected, with lots of deep listening moments weekend. Thank you again.